All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Justin. I'll be your host tonight, and with me this evening are Cody and Brett. Um, we are delving back into a bit of a true crime episode this time around. Feels like it's been a bit since we've done one of these, but before we jump in, let's see what's new. Brett, what's been going on in your world?
Earlier today, I went and did my civic duty and voted in the upcoming election here. Um, it was, yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was, it wasn't really anything interesting about it. It was pretty standard voting process, but we'll see how that turns out in a few days here. But
Yeah.
uh, in terms of fun things, we this third season of Legend of Vox Machina wrapped up this past week. And it was, I would say, easily on. It would be very hard for me to like pick which of the three seasons was better. They've all been very evenly great. Um, this there was like multiple moments just this season where I was like virtually like leaping out of my chair, like cheering for the show. And there's other parts where it's just like kind of heartbreaking, and it's funny. The characters are awesome. The entire cast is all voice actors, so it's all brilliantly done. um if you haven't checked it out and you enjoy like swords and sorcery, it's literally Dungeons and Dragons. It's literally what it is. It's a group who played D&D together and then said, wow, this campaign was amazing, let's turn it into a show.
Nice.
And that's how this came about. So
Oh, wow.
um anyways, yeah, it's on Amazon, and if you have Prime, you can watch it for free, and I would highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in any of that kind of stuff. So that's me.
Nice, nice. Cody, what about you?
Where do I begin? This was like the busiest 9 days of my life. It was super fun, but I'll just do a couple quick little things here. Was in Mexico for a couple days. First time I went to Mexico for a wedding. It was on the beach. Everything was lovely except the ocean, so that was the down part of it. But other than that, it was good. Food was delicious. Everything was beautiful. So I can check that as a new country on my list. So it's kind of exciting. And Halloween party was awesome. Um, since we were recording this post-Halloween party finally, and everybody seemed like they had a pretty good time, at least, I think, at the party. Give me a lot of ideas for next year's party already in like terms of time management and like games for people, etc. But video games are good, so I have a lot of video game related props and hardware and decorations and the cabinets and stuff. I'm gonna combine all that with another host on this show here, Dave, is going to drop off, or actually, I'm picking up from him Tuesday on election day. Dangerous day to be out driving, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to grab, he's got a ton of retro games that he wants me to sell, and he's been asking me for like a year. So I told him when Halloween was done this year, I would get on that. Maybe we could maximize profit heading into Christmas. Maybe people would be interested in that. So. And then I just have a couple really quick, fun little thingies here. Number one, I'm eating my dessert of the night, which are nerd gummy clusters, which I thought contained gluten. And recently we found out that apparently these don't, but only like 90% of the people say that it doesn't. So if I run off mysteriously during this podcast quickly, we're going to find out if that's true or not. So that's one little game I'm playing here today. And
I love Nerds Gummy Clusters.
well,
That's
I
a
didn't I didn't think I could eat them, so
that's a weird way to, endorse our first sponsor, Cody. It
nerd
may or may
gummy
not give me the chance.
clusters. And then also I was just sharing a bit about this before we got on the air, but I received a message on Facebook from a guy named Larry, whose last name I will withhold here, but guy named Larry, who is not my friend on Facebook, and I'm sure as I mentioned to you two before we started to record this, must be a guy I just said something to and pissed somebody off on some thread somewhere.
No.
And he sent me a message that says, F question mark question mark question mark question mark. You look like a real piece of easy SH asterisk asterisk. So you know this guy is hardcore. And then he sent me an image, which I had to click because it said, be careful with images. And then I had to click it again to unblur it. And he apparently sent me a scanned PDF of his own business card as a martial arts instructor in Atlanta, Georgia, as if that's supposed to intimidate me. On the plus side, he gave me his phone number and email address, so there might be some fun that's had with those later on. But I don't know exactly what that was supposed to do. Like, that was supposed to make me not sleep at night because he sent me his karate business card. This is a real thing that just happened, though, and I'm going to be brainstorming during our podcast what I'm exactly going to do with this email and phone number. So I can't wait. This is going to be fun.
Oh God,
I mean, it sounds a little bit like you might be able to get some more information off of Grinder on this guy.
Yeah,
I
I
cannot
like it.
confirm.
oh no, I think it's God, what was the guy from Killer Frequency? Kung Fu Ricky or whatever?
Oh,
I think
yeah.
you just met a real life Kung Fu Ricky.
Inspired by.
Oh man.
That's it for me. How about you, Justin?
Well, I do have to do a shout out for your party. It was incredible as always. I played some games I have never played before. The Penguin one on the NES, Antarctic Adventure or whatever. That one, it was simple, but it was fun. I had never even really heard of it. The setup in your garage with the like enclosed room that had a giant TV for House of the Dead Overkill, fantastic. Just in general, like all the work you put into those is phenomenal. So yeah, hell of a time. That's like the biggest thing that's happened recently in my life.
And I
Uh,
introduced you to a PS4 game.
yes, yeah, Resogun, which I had somehow never played. I might have heard of it, but yeah, it just never showed up on my radar. But yeah, that was like a modern take on Defender, kind of, with the whole like scrolling back and forth along the stage, picking up humans, trying to rescue them before they get kidnapped by aliens or whatever. Yeah, it was neat. Um, Aside from that, I guess the only other big thing worth mentioning is November's rolled around again, and I've actually finally sat down and started writing again, which it feels like it's been a really long time since I've really sat down and done much in that vein at all, and it feels good to be back, just putting words on paper or on a screen or what have you. I actually had just finished writing a scene before we start kick this off, so if I seem a tiny bit scattered, I'm probably still somewhat in that headspace. But I mean, it's a good time. Yeah, yeah, it's what I went to school for, and it's something I don't do as often as I probably should. So nice to be getting back to that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of it for me. Which brings us to today. So we're going back a bit and talking about a case that was one of like four or five I pitched for the idea, and one of the only ones that didn't actually have a solid explanation. So this is the quote unquote suicide of Charles Morgan. Um, Now, before we really jump into it, Brett, I think you said you had heard about this case before. Cody, were you familiar at all with this one before we
No,
started?
just what was the big drink the Kool-Aid, the big suicide pact. That was really all I knew about Charles Manson here, so excited. No, I hadn't heard of this one actually, though, I don't think.
Okay. And Brett?
Uh no, this actually was not one of the ones I had heard of.
Oh,
It was the other one of the other selections, but um, yeah, no, this is my first time hearing about this, and it was like the the more I kept listening, the more surprises kept unfolding, and I was like, this is just crazy.
okay. Yeah, and I had heard of this one in passing, but never really delved a whole lot into it. So let's look at it a bit together and see what this is all about. So the incident, well, series of incidents took place back in 1997. Charles Morgan himself was a 39-year-old president of an escrow company. And God, if you look at this guy, he looks like I'm 41 as I'm saying this, and he looks like he's like 10 years older than me. The escrow business must be hard. Um, but or he might have had some other stuff going on, but we will get to that. So he was on the surface, by all accounts, just a upstanding businessman, doing a lot of, a few high profile cases, but a lot of work involving like land and taxes and that sort of thing. Until one day he dropped his two girls off at school, supposedly went to work and didn't come home. Uh, no word from him. His family, his daughters and his wife had no idea, like, what might have happened, until 3 days later, when he apparently shows back up at the house with a pair of handcuffs, plastic handcuffs, mind you, like dangling from one of his ankles, zip ties around his wrists, and seemingly unable to speak. And at this point, this is the start of where things start getting weird, because by all accounts, it seems like his family thought he was just a normal guy until this incident. Um, so he wasn't able to talk, but he got a pen and paper from his wife and was able to write down that apparently he had been captured and tortured by people he would not name. He told her not to call the cops because if they did, they would have a hit put out on them and they would be killed. And that I've seen varying accounts of this, but that his captors had either the outside of his throat or somehow the inside of his throat with some kind of nerve agent that if he spoke, it would like seep into his system and either drive him insane or kill him. Um, this is already a pretty wild ride. But
Even
it seems like
possibility. Is that a real thing?
I don't know. I mean, there are nerve agents that do weird stuff, but I mean, the two outcomes of either driving you insane or killing you, those are very specific, and I don't really want to be put on any more like watch lists for Googling things than I already have been. So I
Oh,
don't
come
necessarily
on.
want to dive into nerve agents here.
Do it now
Um,
before it's illegal Tuesday. Let's just get it done.
oh God, uh, we might all be needing some nerve agents on Tuesday. Joking, joking. Thank you, NSA. Um, but and even if those weren't the actual effects, I mean, the threat of those possibly being the effects might have been enough to not have this guy talk. So I do want to put that out there. So it could have been anything that he had been like swabbed with or tainted with or dosed with or whatever. Um,
I do
so yeah,
love the fact that just that the handcuff was plastic. Like,
yeah,
what
yeah,
a wonderful little detail in this case. Like,
right.
somebody was like, "Oh shit, we forgot the handcuffs. Run into the convenience store, check the kids aisle."
Which
Yeah,
is, I mean, the zip ties are one thing, but which I didn't know those existed in 1977, but that's how the story goes.
yeah,
Um,
I was really like, everything I saw heard said specifically handcuffs,
mhm.
but I was wondering if it was just like zip ties on his ankle as well. Because the
Yeah,
plastic handcuff seems really strange, but
which we
I can't,
will,
I don't know.
yeah, we might circle back to that a bit later when it comes to like theories as to what actually ends up happening to this guy. Um, but so yeah, but he apparently somehow escaped from these captors. Wouldn't say how, again, wouldn't say who they were. But he stayed home for a week while his wife nursed him back to health. I've seen some accounts say that she managed to feed him with like an eyedropper, which if he could swallow that, I don't know like how that wasn't getting the poison in his system. It's, I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot here that just seems like it doesn't really add up. Um, but anyway, apparently he got back to a semblance of actual health. And during that time, either wrote or told his wife that he wasn't just a mild-mannered escrow agent. Had been working undercover for the Treasury Department to try and keep the mafia from defrauding the government. This is like I've seen slight variants on this, but that's kind of the message he gets across to his wife. Um, which okay, sure, you've been kidnapped and almost killed. Yeah, you may as well, I guess, come clean about everything or almost everything. Because apparently during this whole recovery issue, he also wrote. He got in touch with his father and said that he had written a secret letter that if anything happened to him, this letter was hidden somewhere in his house. His wife didn't know about it. His daughters didn't know about it. No one knew about it except his father. And that if something happened to Charles himself, his father was supposed to go to the house, find the letter, and it would explain everything.
I didn't hear that little tidbit, but they didn't but he didn't say where the letter was.
Nope, just hidden in the
Okay.
house. Conveniently hidden in the house. But wait, there's more, and we will get to that. So from that point onward, he recovers, and the next 2 months go by seemingly normally. Like he goes back to work, either at his escrow agency or working for the Treasury Department. It's unclear. But yeah, 2 months go by, nothing happens, until he disappears again. So the initial disappearance happened back in March, I believe, and 2 months later he disappears again on his way to work, and this time nothing. No, he doesn't reappear. He doesn't. There's no word from him, no notes, no nothing, until sometime later, an words an unidentified woman calls his house. And doesn't like say how she knows him, but that's she simply says Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8, and then hangs up. So she had been speaking to Ruth, Chuck, Charles's wife, and so she goes, picks up the family Bible, like searches that phrase, that passage, which apparently says, "Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." And Ruth, his wife, she doesn't know what to make of this. No one seems to know what to make of this, but it's clearly not a promising development. Um, but time goes by, and that's all she's got until 2 days later. They find Charles's body, uh, which was in on a stretch of desert road outside of his car near San Juan Springs, Arizona. And I should mention that this all takes place in Arizona. Um, he was I need to backtrack slightly because after his initial kidnapping, Charles tried to take some measures to make sure that he and his family were safe. Measures including wearing a bulletproof vest everywhere he went, driving his daughters to and from school, making sure to inform the school that no one, absolutely no one aside from him, was supposed to pick them up, and things like that. And I mention that now because he was found wearing his bulletproof vest, shot in the back of the head, seemingly with his own gun, which was lying in the general vicinity. And he was about 30 feet away from his car in the road, roughly 40 miles west of Tucson. So all this happened, within a matter of weeks after his most recent disappearance. But it gets weirder because beyond the bulletproof vest, which is a sensible thing, even if he had actually been kidnapped, regardless of whether he was an undercover agent or not, he was also wearing, and I quote, "a belt buckle with a knife concealed inside of it." He had the holster for his gun, which again was nearby, but there were no fingerprints on the gun. He had a note in his own handwriting with directions to the place where he was found. He had later determined gun residue on his left hand, showing that he had fired the weapon at some point. Someone else's sunglasses were on the scene. There was a box of ammo. He had one of his own teeth wrapped in a handkerchief in the backseat of his car. And there was, perhaps strangest of all, a $2 bill clipped to the inside of his underwear, with notes written on it, including Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8, seven Spanish names, ranging from the letters A to G, which might have been some sort of code. Those names, as best as I could read on the note, were, because there are pictures of this on the internet, were Acevedo, Becerrano, Casaro, Duarte, and Linas, Fuente, and Gradias. But again, the handwriting was a little hard to make out in some of the shots I found. On the back of this note was a map. Yeah, it just keeps getting more bizarre. On the back of this note was a map to two towns, Robles Junction and Sasabe, which were between Tucson and the border of Mexico. Apparently, those two towns were notable for being very high traffic smuggling areas. So, any comments on the story up till this point? Because there are a few more elements, but I feel like we've covered a lot of ground already. Did you have anything to add? Any comments on the events?
Um, just one thing that you didn't mention there was that he was right-handed, and the gun
Hmm,
residue was found on his left hand.
this is true.
And according to his wife, he could do almost nothing with his left hand.
Yep,
So,
and which does also raise the question of I should note that later on the coroners did rule this death a suicide. Um, Trying to shoot yourself in the back of the head, even with your dominant hand, it's not like an easy angle to get. I mean, it's possible, I'm sure, but it doesn't seem like it's a method most people would use. And I didn't see any mention of him wearing gloves when he was found, and there were no fingerprints on the gun. So we will circle back to that, but it is a very important point. Um, Anything from you on this, Cody? Or
I just think it's a bizarre ass crime scene. I mean, it's pretty crazy. This $2 bill is really interesting as well. I guess this was like some $2 bill that he had kept for a very, very long time. It was very important to him. Um, but to the point where like his family knew about this $2 bill that he carried with him all the time. And I think we're like, so there was some mention, I guess, of something here. I don't think I'm jumping ahead on this part, but there was some mention in the story about how like eventually like he had lost his $2 bill, but he had a chance that he was going to get it back later on. And then the time we finally see it again is when it's like pinned to him at his death scene. So he does in fact get it back, but kind of bizarrely, probably not how he thought that that was going to be. I don't know what to make of this. I mean, why is there a tooth wrapped someplace? Like, that's supposed to be intimidating? Like a single tooth?
I mean, when the guy's already been shot to death. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
did you
I
find it at his crime scene, or did he put his tooth in the hanky? Like that seems more likely to me. Like somebody like, but I think they also didn't they make mention that like the autopsy and the crime scene, like he didn't have any sign of like being in a struggle or like physical violence being done to him other than the gunshot.
I believe so.
So
So
it's
that
like, if somebody had punched him and then like he like spit his tooth out and like wrapped it and just like threw it in the car or something, that would make sense. But if there's no bruising or anything,
right,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's weird, and there are a few elements that excuse me that also make this well even more confounding, because word of the discovery gets out, back to his family and all that. They obviously are trying to deal with this. And then 2 days later, the sheriff's department of Pima County, I believe it was Pima County, gets a call from a woman identifying herself as Green Eyes. She claims to be the same person who called Charles's home, and says she has more details on the events, claiming that she had met him at a motel weeks before his death, that she showed him a briefcase full of money, and claimed that he had become aware of a hit put out on his life that was increasing in value day by day, and that he had arranged to meet the hitman to buy off the hit and save his own life with $90,000. Um, I do believe after that point she hung up. So uh, there is another person claiming to be involved, but it just adds more questions in my opinion. Um, and around the same time, I think it was around the same time, I believe, um, two well-dressed men claiming to be FBI agents showed up at Ruth and formerly Charles's house, and briefly flash their IDs and say, "We need to search the premises." According to his wife, they were very intimidating. She was obviously not in a good emotional state and not in a position to try and like put up a fight or resist. So she let them. They ransacked the place, didn't say what they were looking for, didn't say if they found what they were looking for, left, and never got in contact with her again. Uh, I think it was her, but there was a freedom of information request later on, even put towards the FBI, trying to see, like, hey, what was this all about? The FBI claims to never have heard of Charles Morgan, let alone having him having worked in with them in any capacity. Also, people, possibly these same FBI agents, quote unquote FBI agents, possibly other people related to them, broke into Charles's office and his car, or one of his cars, I think, because his car had been like on the road. It's a little unclear as to like which car the accounts are talking about, and basically they searching for something there as well. Um, and so yeah, which raises the question: were they looking for that letter he was mentioning? Which,
Would seem
uh,
that way.
yeah, and that letter, by the way, never turned up. Which means if that is what they were there for, they found it. But this raises so many questions. Like the FBI and I do believe the Treasury Department disavows any knowledge of ever knowing or working with a Charles Morgan. Um, but he obviously had someone who wished him ill, or did he? Because they're like as I said, the police ruled his death a suicide in the end, and that is one of the theories I've seen, uh, brought forth. Even though it seems outlandish, it is one we're going to explore in a bit here. Um, but based on like everything we've heard so far, do you? I mean, with that last little bit of evidence, uh, is there do we want to like kind of spitball ideas before we jump into the quote unquote official theories I've been able to find online, or do we want to just, or are we ready for that section at this point?
I think we could just pause and take a look at some of the stuff in here.
Sure.
I kind of in the background here was attempting to go down the rabbit hole with this $2 bill, which PS zip ties came out in 1958, it says. So there's
Okay.
that.
Nice.
But I was trying to look up because there was when I was much, much, much younger, I got into a little bit about like how the dollar bills are like minted and like the symbols on them and everything. And it's been a long time since I've looked at any of that. But essentially, like if I recall correctly, I think like the letters on the dollar bills are like indicative of the like Federal Reserve Bank it's tied to in some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. Which not every letter is represented on those. There's letters that don't ever appear on dollar bills. I just think it's interesting that his is like listing names A through G, and this is probably coincidence, but I noticed that the bill was an H itself. So
Oh,
it's like it's covering all the letters up to the actual letter on the bill itself, and all of those letters also happen to be letters that are used on dollar bills. So that's probably nothing. It's just an observation I made. I'd see there's like arrows on there too, like transposing numbers and things
yeah. I
also.
think that was tied to the Ecclesiastes thing because I
Yeah, the
think the
Bible
word,
Oh,
yeah,
I
passage.
see the
yeah,
one eight.
1 to 8, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Which I don't know why he didn't just write that, but or if it was even him that wrote it. I think it
Yeah.
was, yeah. I think it was established it was his handwriting, but yeah, it's yeah, and the
Yeah,
fact that this $2 bill was apparently special to him, I hadn't seen that mentioned, so that's an interesting element too. But
The
you,
map
you
on
were
the
about,
back is kind of bizarro too. Like I don't know what's going on with that either. I know I was listening to some things earlier today on this one, and it said something about and it doesn't look like because I hadn't seen the photo till just now of the back of the dollar bill, but they were saying something like the founding fathers were like labeled like A through G, which doesn't really
yes.
seem to be the
I was
case.
about to mention that.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Uh, 7 of the founding fathers on the back of the bill are numbered 1 through 7.
Oh, okay.
I
gotcha.
did have I had to find out. I saw a list of who all it was
Huh.
someplace, but
Interesting, because yeah, the pictures I've seen of this bill, it's pretty much just the pictures of like the Spanish names, and then the snippet of the map, and like the like numbers for 1 to 8 for Ecclesiastes. Like I it doesn't really show the back of the bill with the founding fathers much at all in the
yeah,
pictures I've been
the
able to find.
what's odd is that I'm really struggling to find a nice full size image of either the
Yeah.
front or the back that aren't extremely small resolution.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah.
even though like I know specifically on the Unsolved Mysteries episode of which I watched both of them.
Ooh,
Um,
bonus points.
Nice.
they like they clearly show the bill, both front and back. So
Oh, really?
those images would be much more easily to find than they are currently. But
Uh,
yeah, here it is: the George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Q. Adams, Andrew Jackson, and Martin Van Buren are the numbered people.
Okay.
and like with the Spanish names, theoretically that might be some sort of code to whoever he was in contact with, maybe. But yeah, I am really kind of at a loss as to what any of that would mean. Um, it's bizarre. Um,
The whole thing is just weird. Like his condition of like when they found him is just bizarro, and maybe you're gonna get into this more with the like theories that you're gonna mention here in a second, but like the only evidence found at the crime scene would indicate that he potentially shot himself with the gun residue and his own gun that's being used. And but then obviously, the question is like, why why would you go around wearing a bulletproof vest for a long time only to shoot
Yes.
yourself in the head?
I don't think you mentioned either that reportedly there were no tracks around the site other than his own.
Well, yeah, that's
No
good.
oh,
tire
that is
tracks
true.
or footprints.
I had forgotten about that part. Yes, that is correct. I do remember seeing that mentioned.
That is pretty
Um,
damning. Yeah, I gotta remember that. Let me look at this a little more here.
yeah. Um, but I mean, it does raise the question of the sunglasses that aren't his. I mean, they could have come from anywhere, but you know, uh, no one in the family seemed to say that. Oh yeah, those were his. He wore them all the time or anything, unless he had just bought them. In which case, maybe. But that's like
Hmm.
the one of the only anomalous elements there,
Yeah,
along with
considering
the fact of
everything else about his life that his family didn't know, I
mm,
think sunglasses
that's true.
that they weren't aware of is probably pretty low on the list.
It's a very good point. Um, yeah, for me, the main question, sure, it seems like he was the only one there, but why were his fingerprints not on the gun? Like,
Yeah,
regardless of which hand he might have used to shoot himself, I did not see any mention of him wearing gloves.
I think
Maybe he
he
was,
would
and it just
find it
wasn't. What was that?
very difficult to clean the gun after he shot himself.
Right? Yeah. And yeah, so that's the main sticking point there. But I if you want, we can launch into the suicide theory now, just since we seem to be on the topic already. Because that is one of the it is one of the it's the official theory, but I find it to be one of the hardest to really buy, personally. Um, because
Yeah,
like
I
I
mean,
said,
yeah, go for it.
okay, because like I said, I mean, if you're gonna I'm going to preface this with the sane approach to this. Like, because if you're going to kill yourself, sure, you might drive out into the middle of nowhere to do it, but there's a lot easier ways to do it than trying to aim a gun at the back of your head with your non-dominant hand. Like side, underneath, whatever, but from behind, it's a very awkward angle. Um, and again, there's the question of the bulletproof vest. Uh, and okay, so let's say he did go out. This all was a suicide in some way, shape, or form. Who was the woman, the green eyes woman? Because she knew about the if nothing else, she knew about the Ecclesiastes thing on the bill. So she, in some way, shape, or form, is connected to this because there's a statistically impossible chance that she could have just randomly rattled that off and then not been connected at all and had that particular passage be on his person, um, when he was found. So that is like a big, big gaping hole in the suicide thing, I think, unless she was part of what drove him to kill himself. But I don't know. To play devil's advocate, though, let's say she was someone he was involved with, and this for some reason was some all big elaborate ruse. Like he like when he showed up the first time, kidnapped. Maybe he wasn't actually poisoned. He was just pretending not to be able to speak. And he pulled the zip tie shut with his teeth around his wrists so that would look like he was bound. And anyone can go out and buy plastic handcuffs. I imagine even back in like 1977. Maybe the bulletproof vest was furthering this ruse, like to try and build up some sort of mystique and story so that his family wouldn't be depressed that he wanted to end his own life. Again, it seems far-fetched, but I don't think it's impossible. It's an awful lot of effort, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one I think would make me think that he had some shame that essentially would have made it so he didn't want to face his family anymore, and this is what drove him to ultimately commit the suicide, whether that was an affair with this lady that calls in his green eyes, whether that is like, because I think I had heard mention as well that this guy was both really good with money and then also like very, very deeply in debt. Like he
Yes.
was on his second or third mortgage for his house at that point.
I forgot about the debt aspect,
Um,
yes.
and he was purchasing a company. It sounded like he was trying to take over a company at the time, and like maybe if he had good indication that that wasn't going to pan out the way he thought it was, maybe. Um, I guess it's possible that he would have looked this up. I mean, it would have been, like you said, a very elaborate ruse to go through the lengths that he did to just do this. Um, but then again, I think about, like you just said, that crime scene. Like, if there's no evidence of anybody else having been there,
Yeah.
then who shot him, you know?
Yeah. It does raise the question of the quote unquote FBI agents too, though, because I mean, according to his wife, people showed up at her house and trashed the place, claiming to be from the FBI.
Yeah.
Unless that was related to his massive amounts of debts. I mean, which again is a possibility, I guess, but it
I mean,
just
the
seems,
guy
yeah.
could have just literally been involved in some shady deals and,
Mhm.
was just, for whatever reason, the mafia or whoever this is, the inside trader, corporate greedy guys, just basically we're gonna kill this guy and his family, and so he just thought maybe like if I kill myself, then maybe they won't go after my family, and this was like what he came up with as the plan for this. So, I mean, it could be suicide per se, but it could be a suicide in an attempt to avoid his family being murdered. That makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah,
Um,
along those that same line, um, like I find just the idea that he, um, just it was just purely suicide on the basis of him being depressed or in like this really bad position in life, whatever. I find that pretty hard to believe, but I not that it's impossible, but with everything else that he did in the previous weeks coming up to that, it seems pretty unlikely.
Mm.
But what I do think is a very big possibility is that he was instructed to do that to save his family. Very similar to what you just described, possibly. Um, Whoever was after him, whoever was the threat to him, uh, perhaps said, "Hey, here's this place," because he had a map to that location. Said, "Go here, shoot yourself, or your whole family is going to be next," which would kind of cover all the angles and technically would be suicide, forced into it. Then there wouldn't be other tracks around. Um, it it doesn't understand or doesn't explain why he apparently used his left hand and why there were no
Mhm.
fingerprints on the gun. Like those are still big
yeah.
like points that aren't covered there, but um possible it's a possibility. I feel
Yeah, 'cause it's almost
pretty
like
strong.
he's framing his suicide to make it look like he was killed by someone, but like there's, he's not like leaving the authorities like a clue to be like, it was these people that pushed me to do this. It's like he's setting up this big elaborate setting, but like there's no payoff for that.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Yeah.
there's the bill, but
I
That's
mean,
true.
yeah.
it,
But
it seems like that was for someone, but we have no idea who.
yeah.
Yeah,
But let's
I don't think
go
we
ahead.
also mentioned, Justin, that this guy was apparently he was a witness that had to testify against some people at the company also, which
I
probably.
I had seen some accounts that mentioned that, but others that didn't, so I wasn't sure quite how accurate that was, but
Yeah,
it
okay.
did show up. Um,
Because
but
I think
that's
like essentially he worked for a company first, right? And that company
I
was found to have like inside trading going on, and then like the
okay,
government
yeah.
had him testify against those people.
Yeah, or he was set to testify at some later dates that was looming or something like that. I've seen that's the thing. The accounts I've seen don't quite have information that really jives with, completely across the board, so I'm not
Yeah,
100% sure on that one.
I believe there's a man. So there's a man named Don Devereaux who comes into play later on. Um, and I believe that he confirmed uh, that Charles was an informant and testified against someone. Now, we he either could not or would not didn't say what the case was, and apparently there are no records of the testimony, what he testified, and what case it was for. Um,
Huh.
and Also, I don't know that you mentioned that, like how heavily the mob it factors into this.
Yeah, I was actually going to say we should look into the mob angle as the next theory as to what happened to him,
Okay, well, we
because
could go to
that
next.
is
Yeah.
a big part of it. Um, so yeah, the mob, it was involved. At least it's heavily speculated that they were involved. Please don't put a hit out on me. In money laundering through buying land in Arizona. Is what I had seen. Partly due to what at the time were pretty unique blind trust laws in the state, which a blind trust, in my limited understanding of these things, is a trust that's established by like the person doing the transaction who's giving another like intermediary full authority to control the money that's being handled, like how it's handled, how it's used, without being directly involved, at least on paper. And apparently, from what I understand, Arizona's laws at the time were such that the only person who knew what was going on with the money was the person handling it themselves, which makes it ripe for exploitation for any kind of laundering scheme, which is why it's heavily believed that the mafia was involved in laundering money by turning it into land that they owned, because at that point it's an established purchase. It's not like a fluid commodity. It's yeah, money laundering is complex. So yeah, it is. If the mob angle is what actually happened, then it's speculated that if whether or not Chuck was working with the Treasury Department or not, he was also working with the mob to facilitate this laundering, and that either he got in too deep, or he tried to push his luck, or he had like some government agency in on but turning a blind eye for a cut of the profits. But basically, this whole idea is that he dove into something he wasn't prepared for, really overestimated his abilities to do clandestine work, and it ended up coming back to really, really bite him in the end.
That's
Um,
Ozark on Netflix.
I
Go
was
watch it
going to
now.
say that. As I was listening to this, and doing research on it, I just kept coming back to thinking, this is the plot to Ozark.
Yeah.
Whether or not
that's a
that's a
show.
coincidence or whether they kind of got a bit of their
Huh.
inspiration from this case,
And Marty, I mean
it's very
Morgan.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a show I've had recommended to me several times. I haven't actually watched it, but I think I might have to after just hearing both of you chime in about this.
I enjoyed it. Karen could not watch through it because it made her too tense all the time, so she had to stop. But
It's intense all the time,
every
man.
episode's
Yeah,
like, fuck, 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 fuck.
gotcha. So yeah, what do you two think about this possible theory?
Ugh.
That yeah, he was just a guy who got greedy or desperate and paid the price for it.
Interesting thing about this one is that he could have not even been greedy. It could have just been that like he was the informant against the mafia, and they were like, "Well, we're gonna kill you." Or he could have been in on it with them. That's the weird thing about this one. I don't even know what side of the law this guy is on, but
Yeah. Um, yeah, no matter how much you dig at this, there are like multiple ways the rabbit hole can go, and which is part of what makes this such a compelling mystery to look at. Um,
Yeah.
because and a related theory, not to necessarily diverge from this one just yet, but the other major theory I saw was that he was working undercover for the Treasury Department after all, and that he turned up or was put in charge of information not just about the mob but about corrupt politicians too, and that it was a government hit that was out on him.
This
So
is
I mean,
Ozark.
yeah. So apparently, yeah, if you want to know what happens, just go watch Ozark.
Brett, you were gonna say something. What were you saying?
Well, I believe that this is also partially confirmed, not directly that he was working with the mafia, but through his own paperwork that he kept and investigations by this Don Devereaux guy later on. Um, like there are like receipts and paperwork stating like that he was doing these land deals and like buying gold and platinum from other countries. Like there's all sorts of paperwork that he kept that look very much like money laundering. So
And the Devereaux guy, he was a writer for or like a reporter for Unsolved Mysteries at one
yeah,
point, wasn't he?
journalist. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I did see that the show itself after they aired this episode, they started getting calls with tips about money laundering being a major factor in what happened. So one of those instances where Unsolved Mysteries actually got feedback that yeah, might have been accurate.
When they
Um,
said that this was like on episodes of the show, I feel like we've at least done one podcast where we heard that and then like we went to look for it and like it just doesn't seem to actually exist on Unsolved Mysteries.
yeah.
But the fact that this one's like pretty obviously on there, Brett said he watched them,
yeah.
then there we go. Yeah, the Devereaux guy is interesting too here, and this is like a whole nother thing here, but like. I don't know if you want to go down this as a
Sure.
side jaunt, but they're talking about like attempts made on his life as well as the person who is investigating this crime. Do you want to touch that, or do you want to do that later on?
No, go for it. Go for it. I mean, because I think
I,
it's
I'm just,
relevant.
just just checking out the website here. This is on truecrimezone.com. But basically, this guy is doing the investigative work for this, and the unfortunate person who worked next to him was a guy named Doug Johnston, apparently, who had a car that was very similar and worked in the office near Don Devereaux and was shot in the head on the left side, even though he was right-handed.
Also ruled a suicide despite there being no gun at the scene.
Yep.
Well,
It's
And
amazing.
then
It's amazing the crazy ways people find to kill themselves, you know?
says a year after Doug died, then another investigative reporter named Danny Casolaro contacted Don Devereaux to share the evidence he had found about the illegal gold transactions. And before they were about to meet, he was found dead in his hotel bathtub with his wrist slashed.
I heard slash multiple times, which it suggests to me that it's
Committed
not something you
guy.
do
Oh,
yourself.
yes.
Yeah. Like
Um,
unless you're really bad at it or something, but I
In,
mean,
death was ruled as
interesting side
suicide.
point about the Casolaro guy. There's actually a different Netflix show all about his death and how he was doing other work like like unearthing government like corruption.
really.
So his
Wow.
death may not have been directly related to this case, but
This is interesting. Danny said he was close to
Well,
breaking a case that may have implicated the mafia. He called the organization the Octopus. Case records from his investigation have never been found since then. Um, he
and the
also
fact
was
there's
found with bruises and missing fingernails as well.
yes, I was about to say there was evidence of what can only sensibly be considered defensive wounds, and yet suicide. Apparently, he tried to stop himself from what he was doing to his wrists, is what they wanted you to believe.
That's just
Uh,
suicide.
but yeah, and also the fact this is like the fourth time we've mentioned evidence that should exist that doesn't seem to exist anymore. I mean, there's that element to this all too. which, I mean, sure, the mob can probably make that disappear too, but it also seems to maybe suggest that maybe this was on the government side of things too. Because, yeah, there's so much of this that's just so weird.
When did these episodes air?
I
Mm.
I
Does
actually
anyone
had a hard time
remember?
tracking them down. I think I saw one of them listed as 1990, but I also saw
Think
it
I
listed
saw
as
like
like in
season three and season
1992.
season six or something, but I don't know when those are.
Yeah, so one
Yeah.
of them is in season 3 of the Robert Stack era, and the other one is in season 6 of the Dennis Farina era.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's why I couldn't find the other one. I was looking in season 6 of the original
Yeah.
run. So,
And they're
And
nearly the exact same episode, right down to the
oh,
dialogue that Dennis Farina says.
really,
It's
oh,
nearly
that's
a
weird.
carbon copy of the episode. It's kind of odd, but yeah.
and is this so the Don Devereaux guy he was helping put together the first episode? Is that where he fits in?
Yes,
I think so.
yes.
So have we ever heard anything as like a follow-up to that guy? Like it seems weird that this guy that worked next to him was like killed on accident because he was thought to be this other guy, and then nothing ever happened to this Devereaux guy.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking after
I'm
that
I'm
he.
not
Oh, go on.
I'm not certain what he did. I believe that he was contacted by an anonymous FBI or CIA agent later, and that person confirmed to him that he had a hit, like a contract on his life,
Oh
like
wow.
actively. So, but I don't know like where he is currently, if he's still in the States,
I
like
mean,
being
this is
safe, or if he moved out of the. I don't know.
just thinking
Yeah.
at like this mafia angle or even the government is it's weird. Like this struck me earlier too. Like so this Doug Johnston guy works next to Devereaux, has a similar car, leaves in his shot, and then a year later, this other guy, Danny Casolaro, is gonna give this Don Devereaux some new evidence. Like if you were the mafia or the government and like you fucked up the first hit on Don and accidentally killed Doug, like then they just didn't try again. Like that's also kind of weird. Like a year later, he's like, "Oh, this other guy contacted me," and you're like, "Well, they didn't have any
Yeah.
chances in the year to kill you after they tried to kill you then."
Unless they were
Yeah.
maybe waiting to see if he would back off on the whole thing, but which seems awfully generous,
But that's
regardless of who
also
was behind
I don't
it.
think
Yeah.
that's how these work though.
No,
I saw on a few sites too that were like Charles Morgan was attempting to buy off the contract on his head, and I'm like, I don't think that's how the mafia works. Like you give them the $90,000 and then they still shoot you in the head. Like
which, yeah, that is another theory of what happened, that he actually met the hitman on this stretch of highway, gave him the money and just got shot for it anyway. I mean, yeah, that I was going to get to that, but he beat me to the punch. Um, so yeah, uh, maybe it could have that could have been naivety on his part. Like he was in over his head. He thought he had a chance to maybe get this all to stop, and he just really overestimated like what $90,000 would do for him, you know?
did we talk about the hotel that he was at also? The motel?
I did I mentioned it in passing. I
Okay.
did see the only other thing I found on this was that at some point later on, closed circuit TV footage did emerge of Chuck and a woman in the vicinity of the hotel together, I believe going into a room. So
Yeah. And I
she
think the
was there.
hotel
Yeah,
confirmed he was there as well.
I think
Like
so.
he had signed in and
Yeah.
stuff, you know.
He was registered at the hotel under his own name.
Yeah.
Which really suggests he was in over his head. Like he
This
didn't know how
guy's
this works.
missing.
They'll never think to look for me if I sign my own name.
Yeah.
uh, but yeah. So I mean, there is proof that he was having some sort of meeting there with a woman that was not his wife. What for?
Yeah.
Who can say? I don't know if it mentioned him having a briefcase. Even if it did, there's nothing, no way to say what was in it. So yeah, there are parts of this that seem undeniably true, but what they actually mean is really hard to say.
So we don't have
Like,
anything that actually confirms this guy worked for the Treasury Department, correct?
nope. The FBI disavowed any knowledge of ever working with him, and I think the Treasury Department did as well.
Yeah.
So
I
like
mean,
any government agency he claimed to be connected to says they have never met the guy.
like Devereaux says like his investigation confirmed that he was working for them, but there isn't like direct evidence.
Okay.
Like
Right.
these agencies are saying no, we don't have anything to do with him. So
Mhm.
Devereaux could have had bad information, maybe, or who knows.
Or it could be being covered up. It's impossible to say because at this point it's hearsay, regardless of which direction
Hmm.
it comes from. Um, but
Can
yeah,
we talk
yeah, with
about want to talk about the government agency angle?
sure, yeah, I touched on that a little bit, saying that maybe in doing his work, he found evidence that prominent politicians were involved in this money laundering or other nefarious dealings, and in an effort to not be arrested or thrown out of office or what have you, they put the hit out themselves. Um, and considering the state of politics today, it seems like I could have a very easy time believing that could be the case. Not sure about 1977. Uh, what about you guys? I mean, do you think this is at all plausible that he? I mean, because that's what kind of the extent of the information, the hard, quote unquote, hard information I have on this angle, that it's speculated he might have found stuff on government officials and they shut him up permanently.
Honestly, I feel like this is a pretty strong theory. In part because everything that like kind of surrounding the first disappearance of him, uh, like he comes back and claims that they used some sort of hallucinogenic thing on him so that he couldn't speak, and that doesn't sound like mafia. That sounds like the government. That sounds like an agency.
Yeah,
Like
that does seem like CIA kind of stuff.
the mafia doesn't just mess around with stuff like that. They're just like, you're gonna go and you're gone. Like that's my understanding of it.
That's
They don't
yeah,
play around with things. It's just done, and either they cover it up or they don't. And
gotcha.
that's
Yeah,
the end
that's
of
a
it.
solid point.
Um, so it sounds like that. Like you hear all these things about like weird, you know, agents like the FBI, CIA, interrogations and like torture things, and like that's where that feels like it falls into is that kind of range. Um, and then after that, we have him, essentially being strong armed into testifying against either this banking company or possibly the mafia. And so that original disappearance could have been the government like trying to get him to do this, So I don't, to me, it seems like it's pretty plausible.
I had initially kind of written this theory off as being like the most outlandish of them, but you do make a good point about the efficiency of the mafia compared to like the will break you and make you talk kind of approach of like government agencies. Yeah, mafias just will break you and like make you disappear forever. Uh, but yeah, the more I'm thinking about this one, the more I'm coming to think the conclusion I might have shortchanged it because I mean he had information on like politicians. Yeah, I could see why they want that under wraps. He didn't want to testify against the mob. I could see why they'd want to change that. I mean, there are a lot of angles that could have gotten the government involved in saying, "Hey, knock it off," or "Hey, do this," or yeah.
And it
Hmm.
could have
It
even been not even like an official FBI, CIA thing. It could have been just a rogue agent who was bought by the mafia. Like he could have been like a corrupt dude and like had enough resources to like make this happen.
hmm.
I
And
hadn't
that's why
considered that
that
angle.
could explain why the FBI didn't have any files on Morgan. So it's a possibility to
I
me.
was just gonna say, for what it's worth, his four daughters, that's basically what they believe is that their dad just knew too much about too many people and was killed because of it. Politicians and businessmen, etc.
Not sure. Well, I that's kind of exhausted the theories, like the quote unquote official or at least prominent theories I've been able to dig up. And we've added a few interesting twists to them already. Just to
Aliens,
it would explain the lack of fingerprints. Uh,
exactly. No tire tracks.
uh,
Sandworms.
Based on the tooth in the back seat, it was the Blair Witch.
Yes.
yeah, he stood in the corner of his car and then shot himself in the head.
It looks like he walked himself out into the desert, but in fact, the Shan people only travel single file.
Uh, yeah, based on that, I'm getting the impression we're out of legitimate theories or speculation at this point. So do we want to like rate these as in like most to least plausible, or do we want to just like go with what we think is the answer, or like the most plausible answer, and like leave the others in the dust?
Shit, I don't know what it is. Did we mention that? Wasn't there another guy that called too? Did we mention him?
Uh
The guy that called and said he was the husband of Green Eyes.
oh, no, we haven't
That
mentioned that.
information was in there in a couple things I saw. Yeah,
I
Oh,
forgot exactly what he said though. I don't have the screen open.
I think he said very little other than he claimed to be the husband of the Green Eyes character. Essentially confirmed some of her story, and then that was it. Like I don't think it
huh.
went much beyond that, but I didn't write down what is the conversation was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Green Eyes. That's probably the biggest question mark in all of this. Like, was she a contact in the government? Was she a mafia contact? Was she someone he was just having an affair with? I
I
have no idea who this lady is.
I feel like if we knew who she was or like what side of the situation she was on, might explain the entire thing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's just yeah, a giant question mark. I mean, but I think it's undeniable she is connected somehow because she knew about the what was written on the bill, and that is something you can't just like guess randomly if you're an attention seeker or like a
Yeah.
prankster calling in saying like, oh, I totally know what happened to Charles Morgan. You're not just going to pull that out
Mm.
of thin air.
And
So
presumably she was the lady at the motel. I guess we don't
uh,
know that, but
yeah, we there's never been an actual photo of her being identified as this is Green Eyes, like
yeah.
but there's closed circuit TV footage of a woman going into the motel room with him, so it's that's presumably what she looks like. Who the heck she actually is, I've no clue.
So random just to think like this guy like just hired a hooker, brought her back to his hotel room, and
Look at my briefcase full of money.
she's like, "What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Well, it's gonna be a weird one, but call my wife, tell her."
uh
Did a thought that occurred to me was that yeah, he just asked her to call his wife to give her this message, not necessarily because the message was for her, but that he knew if he gave her the message, then it would get to where it needed to go at some
Hmm.
point.
that's a possibility too.
Because it feels like the passage is part of a some sort of code or cipher
Yeah,
and not to be taken directly. Possibly
Yeah,
linked to the information on the bill. Who knows?
it's
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this one has some really interesting details to it, but I don't know how you can even really speculate what you think the answer is. I mean, it's
Yeah, I think you just kind of have to go with what your gut
I
feels
Yeah.
like
mean,
it is.
to piece together the actual story of what happened, I guess all you could do is look at the facts we have. So we know he was presumably alone when he died. It does, if it didn't seem like he was completely alone when he died, I would have a hard time believing he actually shot himself in the method that is required for that to be accurate. Because I think even the podcast I was listening to earlier said something about like you would have to like use your thumb to like pull the trigger at the right angle, they figured, or something bizarro, which
It's
Mm.
yeah, like I'm holding my hand behind like my head right now as if holding a gun, and there's like an inch and a half of clearance between like my trigger finger and the back of my head, unless it was a snub nose like revolver, and I don't think it was. It was a 357 Magnum, I believe. I don't think they said it was a snub nose.
so
There's not enough clearance to do that.
did
I
I
think
miss this part? Go ahead, Brett.
I think if you turned your head, like if your head's facing forward, it's very difficult. But I think if you turn your head to the
Okay.
right, you could do it. But
Or
even then, it's
downwards, there's a
awkward
little
and
more,
doesn't
but
make sense if the goal is just to end your life,
Right.
why make it more difficult already than
Yeah,
it's going to be?
So was
I'm
his
glad
car in the desert and then like he was
he
just so
was.
far from his car with like footprints? Is that
Yeah, he was. I believe it was 30 or 40 feet away from the car.
oh
Let
God
me.
damn it.
Yeah. Da. He was found 40 miles. Oh yeah. So he was, I believe, 30 feet away from the car.
With only his footprints.
That's what the
As
reports say.
reported. Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't rectify that. Like, I don't know how you would get a body 30 feet from the car with one set of footprints
Yeah.
unless he killed himself.
Mm.
But then why the charade of how he killed himself? Like, it just doesn't
And
make sense.
I mean, not
the
knowing the terrain,
Mhm.
it seems like it would be difficult to cover your tracks. It would be like you like wipe your footprints away or something. It'd be like, well,
Yeah,
obviously somebody just cleaned something up here.
Right. Yeah, it would be too
yeah.
uniform or
But
Yeah.
yeah.
even then, they'd have to have like a car that they left in or something,
Mm.
presumably. So you can't.
Yeah, yeah. And even like if
Um,
say they took to the air in a helicopter, like one of the more outlandish ideas, possibilities, that would still have kicked up all the rest of the sand and whatnot, and that would have obliterated the other footprints,
so then, okay,
regardless. But
so then if he's by himself and he's the only person there, he had to have killed himself, and he must have done it in a manner in which he was just trying to make it look like it was murder, not suicide, but not maybe not even comprehending like he thought that far through, but he did not think about like there's no other prints around here, or
yeah, I
Maybe.
so
mean, at any crime there are like missteps, there are mistakes that the killer makes, or killer, burglar, what have you, and I think that applies to a suicide too. Like if you're trying to go for a certain thing, you're not going to think of every possible like
Mm.
angle or element,
yeah.
especially if he was depressed enough to go through this whole elaborate thing. He was looking at the big picture and missing like the small details of, oh, there's only my footprints here. Um, but yeah,
It's
I
weird, man.
it is
Okay.
so.
I'm now changing my mind now. I'm convinced now that I think he did kill himself, even though I didn't think that was the case. But
I think my final like what I'm going to put forth as my most plausible theory, or at least the least improbable theory,
yeah.
is going to be a kind of a blend of a lot of what we talked about, not any one of the main three. Um, are we ready for theories at this point, or do we have more we wanted to kind of like bounce back and forth first?
I think we definitely could hash through a lot of stuff yet, but I don't know that we need to at this
Okay. Um, so did you want me to take points on this one, or did one of you have like something you really wanted to like get out there first?
I can go. I don't care. I just think
Okay.
based on what we have, he must have killed himself, which when I was looking at the case earlier, I didn't think that was the case. I was just pretty convinced like somebody had worn gloves and used his gun to shoot him in the back of the head, but I don't see how if the details of the crime scene are accurate, which, who knows how that's reported anyway, I guess. But oh, another thing we didn't mention too was the sheriff, I think, ruled it a suicide, but the coroner refused to rule it a suicide.
That sounds right.
Um,
Yeah.
saying it was more or less unexplainable, like it could have been a murder, it could have been a suicide. But I think it had to have been a suicide just based on the body details. Thinking back about like why, what was he doing? I guess that's tricky with like the motel room and the code and all of this money and all of this. Like it's really fun for
Yeah.
me to think that he was like making some secret cipher and treasure map and all of these other things. And maybe that's the case. I would like to think that that was the case, but like just the basic details of this case is it had to be a guy who was in trouble either financially and he created this like narrative around his life, like Secret Life of Walter Mitty style, or he was somebody who the mafia or the government was really looking to come after. I just can't understand why, if that's the case, they had, ample opportunity to kill this guy and didn't, but then just like the Don Devereaux guy, like why did they not kill him for the next year then too? Like it's
Yeah.
weird. I think maybe the concept that like he did actually know that he had a hit on his life and the fact that he was trying to spare his family in any way that he could, whether that was paying it off or whether that was like meeting people or even killing himself to avoid their having trouble afterwards. Um, it has to be the case. There's some parts that don't add up for sure, like the FBI guys at the house. I didn't really focus on that much before, but now thinking about that, like what were they looking for? Was it like the other half of the cipher for the dollar bill? Also, why was the dollar bill? So he was found with the dollar bill in his underwear, basically,
It was
his
like clipped,
pants.
yeah, clipped to his underwear.
But I guess we don't know, but presumably, no, we do know because there was, sorry, I was supposed to solve this, and now I'm thinking more and more about this. But there was and I didn't see anything on the sites tonight here, unfortunately, mentioning it. But there was the comment about like that the $2 bill had been taken from him and that he was supposedly getting it back. And if that's to be believed at all, then that would mean whoever killed him did clip it back on him. Why the fuck they would do that though, I don't know. Like, why would you put that back out there? Okay, so I'm gonna say this guy killed himself to protect his family from some financial problems that he had, or some people that had it out for him. But more or less, I mean, he had to have invented this, I guess. I guess I'm going with like he kind of created his own over elaborate mystery to explain how he dies here. Like, there's too many parts that don't add up, but I don't know. Suicide, trying to protect his family. I don't know the details beyond that, though. How or why or who.
All right, so I'm gonna lob one last grenade in here at the last minute,
Whoa.
um, because I don't know how it fits in, but I find it be a really interesting detail that could somehow play into it. But the fact that um, Charles Morgan was a member of the Freemasons or the Masons, a Masonic lodge in Tucson.
Of course he was.
So, of course, there's always, oddities and conspiracies surrounding that kind of information, but potentially that's what kind of explains some of this with the $2 bill. Um,
Hmm.
I I don't know. I don't know where to go beyond that, but I find it to be an intriguing idea that is somehow connected. Uh, Beyond that, I'm leaning into something similar to what Cody just explained. I feel it's most likely that he killed himself because he was forced to do it. Um, but I still like I cannot explain how the gun apparently had no prints on it. It was just wiped clean. It doesn't make any sense. He couldn't have done it himself. Um, but I mean I feel pretty strongly that the police department did not report everything as accurate to what the situation. I mean, because they ruled it a suicide when anyone looking at this clearly would look at that and say, well, that's not just a straight up suicide. So there seems to be a lot of details that they didn't release or whatever. So maybe the gun wasn't clean. I don't. It's possible. But where I fall into this, I feel like he quite possibly was forced into shooting himself to save the rest of his family. It's why he had a map to this location. Um, it's why he was apparently shot with his own gun. Um, and the reason all this came about was because he was just got in too far over his head with, the mafia and possibly a corrupt agent for some government agency. Um, I still can't explain everything, but that's where it falls for me.
Um, yeah, initially going into this, because of the lack of fingerprints on the gun, I was leaning away from the idea that this was a suicide. It just seemed like a easy way for the authorities to sweep it under the rug and, dissolve anyone else of any sort of culpability. I mean, but the more we have talked about the rest of it, the more I'm leaning towards that. The fingerprints still get me. The I was while you were talking, I was trying to see if there was a way to like pull your sleeve up and still have enough motion in your hands to maybe like hold a gun and pull a trigger, and then like as you fall, maybe the sleeve falls back or I, I don't know. That's the only
I see what you're
explanation I
saying.
can. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
creative
don't think it's
thinking.
plausible. I don't think it's plausible though, because I just dropped my hand like back like that, and my sleeve stayed up for the most part. So they would have noticed his sleeve was like weirdly up around his hand. You would think. Uh,
If he had long sleeves,
if he had long
it is
sleeves, that's the
Arizona.
thing. Yeah, and if he didn't, then I have no idea how the heck he
Hmm.
managed that. It also doesn't explain the tooth. Like no signs of a struggle. He's missing a tooth. There was no mention of whether it had been pulled recently or what. Presumably it had because there was no mention from his family about him missing a tooth the last time they saw him. I cannot explain the tooth for the life of me.
Hmm.
Um, like why it was there, why it was wrapped up neatly, why there was no bruising, like if he had gotten into a fight. So it had to have been like removed with surgical implements or pliers. But again, I have no idea what that's about. So I'm just kind of right now. I'm just trying to get all of the unexplainable crap out of the way. Green Eyes, no idea who she is, or how she knew about. Well, I mean, if she probably knew about the $2 bill, the Ecclesiastes thing because she was with him and they discussed it. But
Definitely
like,
makes that romance song "Green Eyes" by Coldplay look a little differently now. I'll tell you
man, Ozark was inspired by this. That song was inspired by this.
that.
Who
Coldplay's
knew?
behind the whole thing.
But yeah, so I'm gonna cut through the all the like navel gazing here and just try to pin this down to something that makes any semblance of sense. I, despite the lack of fingerprints, if it wasn't for the fact the bullet had been from his own gun, I would have said there was no way he shot himself. Somehow, I think he managed it. I do not know how. I think he dreamt up this big elaborate thing. I think I agree with you two that it was to try and get heat off of his family or to like I don't know if he was following orders. I don't know if he dreamt up a lot of these elements to try and make it seem more plausible, but I do think he was compelled to shoot himself. Now,
Voodoo.
whether
New
we didn't cover
theory.
this, yeah, we didn't cover like the zombie powder angle. No, but I'm really wondering like how deep this goes. Like the FBI agent, quote unquote FBI agents ransacking his house afterwards. That does lead me to believe he was involved in some stuff that was deeper than my initial thought. And my initial thought was he was just having an affair with this green eyes woman, and that coupled with the fact that he was in apparently a sizable amount of debt led him to concoct this entire story and then shoot himself to make it seem like he was being coerced. But it's the FBI agents ransacking the house, ransacking his office, and like apparently like going through one of his cars. If it wasn't for that, I would say it was just an affair and that gone wrong, and he tried to save face. But I think he was involved in something else, whether it was the mob, whether it was crooked FBI, like government agents, politicians, or some combination thereof. I don't know. But he got in over his head with whatever he was involved with, and in order to save his family, I think I agree with you. He either received orders or made the decision himself to get out of the picture and take his own life. But everything leading up to that is muddy water in my book. I have no solid ground as to whether it was the mob that he was involved with, or the government, or like a rogue FBI agent, or there's so much of this that just does not gel at all. And yeah, my theory is kind of in line with you guys, only because I have no idea what else we could put forth to explain the handful of solid facts we do know. Yeah, this is one of the strangest things we've ever like covered that is grounded at all in reality. Um, so yeah, I am mostly in agreement with you two on like what happened. But all the corroborating evidence and details is just I have no clue.
An interesting one to actually know what the real story is on this for sure.
Definitely.
I was just thinking too, what if there was what if both angles were correct? What if he was working for the government and the mafia, or what, I don't even know that it have to be the mafia, like it could just be like powerful businessmen were out after him. Um, and the government knew that and essentially was trying to protect him this entire time. Like, where did he get a bulletproof vest from? Where did he get this gun from? Who told him to stay at this hotel? Was Green Eyes a government agent? And so, like, what if the government was actually doing its best to actually save this guy and protect him as almost like witness protection, more or less, and like the mafia still got through to him somehow anyway, and this is where it ended up at. But it's kind of interesting. And then the government, of course, would just wash their hands of this and be like, we don't know what happened. Like, I don't know.
Uh, yeah, I think above all else, regardless of what the actual facts are, the fact that we can feasibly pin this on the government, the mafia, crooked businessmen, a rogue FBI agent, and just the fact that any of those seem plausible, I think that speaks to something much deeper and much more fundamentally broken in this country. The fact that anything from our government to organized crime could be responsible for this man's death. It's just the fact that yeah, that just seems like it's a symptom of something that's deeply, deeply wrong.
Election night 2024, everyone. Make
It all
sure
comes
you
full
pay
circle.
attention.
I need to buy more booze in light of that.
My
Uh,
goodness. That's an interesting case, though, I gotta say.
yeah, yeah,
I had never heard
and
of this, but
yeah, but even though we've covered things ranging from like ghost ships to aliens to Bigfoot on this podcast, I think this is one of the more mysterious, and
reminds
it's
me a
really
little
weird.
bit. What was the case we did on the guy with the bag?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh God, what was his name? Yeah, at the hotel,
That
who was
was
seen on the
that
closed
wasn't the
circuit.
Maddox guy, was it? Was that a different one?
Uh, Let me.
We
Oh
did the
God, let me
Josh
dig
Maddox
back.
mystery. No, that was the kid in the chimney, right?
That was the kid in the chimney. Yeah. Uh,
Hashtag sorry, kid in the chimney. I didn't
sorry,
mean to
we
make
forgot
light
your
of
name.
you.
Let me
Uh,
actually go back and try to look that up.
now I remember that kid's name. I don't remember that guy's name though. It was the
Yeah.
bag dude. But
Well,
that was also similar. It had like this element of like seemingly he killed himself. Seemingly
mhm.
somebody may have been after him. He may have been on the
Peter
run.
Bergman.
Peter
Bergman. Thank you.
Bergman, the Irish mystery. Yes,
Yep,
that was our
It's
St. Patrick's Day episode.
that's
yeah.
what it was. Yeah.
In a way though, it's fitting we couldn't think of his name because that man seemed like he just wanted the world to forget him.
It was possibly not his real
So
name anyway.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, the fact that we couldn't even remember the alias, it showed that he almost got what he was after. Uh,
That's funny.
yeah, gallows humor or no humor at all at this point, I
Yeah,
think.
no doubt.
Oh man.
My
Well,
gosh. Well,
yeah, go
normally
ahead.
we want people to listen to our episodes, but if you are a strong businessman in the Tucson, Arizona area or the mafia, do not listen to this episode.
Yeah, yeah.
Once again, I
Yeah.
have been Joe, America's favorite podcast
Oh man.
host.
But yeah, I, I think that's about all we got for this one, folks. I promise to anyone who might be listening, we really don't know what happened here. I swear, I promise. And that's been it for this episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. And as we said before, go vote.
Go vote. Do those things. Bye.
See you
Bye.
next time.
Uh,
Hey, fondlings and fondlers. This has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, your favorite podcast. It's most people's favorite podcasts, or at least so my mom tells me. You can check us out all over the place online at our homepage, www.fondpod.com or fondpodcast.com. You can also check us out across your social media sites, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your streamed podcast. Thanks so much.